There's a new study that's coming out of Northwestern University that it used AI technology to identify groups of criminal police officers in Chicago that account for a disproportionately amount of misconduct. So what we do know comes to us via Vice. What they've said is that the study identified approximately 160 groups of officers referred to as crews. The identified groups consisted of less than 4% of Chicago's police officers, yet they accounted for about 25% of all use of force complaints, city payouts for civil and criminal litigations, and police-involved shootings. These crews generated about 18% of all complaints filed by Black residents and 14% of all Hispanic residents, according to the researchers. To identify cops who intentionally group themselves into crews, the researchers used data from sources including complaints, assignments, and settlements to see which officers were involved in alleged misconduct, how often recurrent co-misconduct happened within the group instead of external to it, whether officers in a crew engaged in similar types of alleged misconduct, and whether there seemed to be well-defined membership, whether by age, location, race, and other attributes. Now, it may sound somewhat counterintuitive, but what we know is that the study's authors are arguing that this research, the findings here, that they fly in the face of this whole bad apple cop narrative that conservatives have been pushing for decades. Here's what the authors of the studies say. Explanations for police misconduct often center on a narrow notion of problem officers, the proverbial bad apples. Such an individualistic approach not only ignores the larger systemic problem of policing, but also takes for granted the group-based nature of police work. Nearly all of police work is group-based, and officers' formal and informal networks can impact behavior, including misconduct. And in the study, what they did is they identified 3 of Chicago's well-known crews. That's the Watts crew, the Skullcap crew, and the Austin 7. And I have no idea where they get these names. But what we know per Vice is that the Watts crew became an integral part of the drug trade in communities it policed. More than 212 convictions have been overturned because of misconduct by the crew, but only 2 officers have been convicted. 5 officers, 4 are still on the force, make up the Skullcap crew, which built up 138 allegations of misconduct. Officers were regularly involved in many reported instances of excessive and unwarranted force, sexual abuse, and harassment, including strip searches, planting drugs, theft, and false arrest, the researchers write. Now, the study, it is limited in that it doesn't dive into how the crews actually form themselves, but previous research is consistent with the study's findings. In 2021, the Financial Times analyzed officer complaint data in Chicago, New York, and Philly, and found that while thousands of officers in each city received at least 1 complaint since 2007, 10% of them accounted for 1/3 of the complaints. And not to mention that there are other studies out there that have concluded that abusive officers tend to operate in clusters like little gangs. Cenk, is this surprising for you?
Yeah, no, unfortunately, none of that is surprising. Cops acting like criminals when they're supposed to be catching criminals. Okay, look, it happens. And if it was really a few bad apples, humanity is what it is. But that's not the situation here. It's not like, oh, we've caught 2 or 3 of them and then we put them in prison and we're consistent and don't worry. No, it's systematic. It's crews doing it together, and they do it all the time. Got away with it for decades, and then even so, most of them go unpunished and they're still cops. What that says is the system is saying, what you did is okay. We don't mind it. And by the way, if you want to do it again, the theft, the sexual assault, the whatever else, and while the other cops look away, if you're looking away from cops doing criminal behavior, there's not a chance in the world you're going to get prosecuted. It would be shocking if you lost your job. So this is not uncommon. This is very common. And to the point that they're making about certain crews or groups of cops, and they can be called different things in different jurisdictions, creating a lion's share of the criminality. What that tells you, like for example, I got another stat on top of the one Adrian just gave you. just 4% of the cops committed 25% of the transgressions and the criminal activity, right? What that tells you is everybody knows. I mean, they're doing it in such a brazen way. They took over the drug trade. Everybody knows. And then it takes them decades to do something about it because they're not really fighting crime. They're getting paychecks and doing whatever the hell they want. Power trips, abusing people, not showing up to crime scenes, going to catch Pokemon as the LA cops did. Like we told you a couple of days ago, everybody goes out and hangs out at the 7-Eleven. You got a call, they're not gonna come. It's gonna take forever for them to come because maybe they're doing their own crime somewhere else in town. So I wish that it was not systematic, that it was a few bad apples, but it ain't. Because for cops, the number one people that they want to protect is other cops.
Absolutely, that blue line runs thick. Well, of course, unless you're a black cop and then you're just on your own, as we've seen. But the thing is, it's like, as you had noted, the fact is these people are making six-figure salaries and they're able to abuse their power, commit all these offenses against citizens and face no consequences whatsoever. They have the unions protecting them and then they have their brothers protecting them. And it just really shows you that, as far as I'm concerned, these aren't crews, these are gangs. This is organized crime and it's state sanctioned. And so until there are true consequences for this behavior, it seems that it's going to continue, and also it's going to continue to create this militarized state that we have that will end up enforcing the laws, especially as we're seeing the laws now turn on people's privacy rights. And when we look at this study that was conducted in Chicago, one thing we definitely do also know is that the Chicago PD has had a long history of gross misconduct and criminal activity. And so it is somewhat of an organized crime. And this is what we know as well from the article there, that the city's police department is the second largest in the country, 14,000 officers and civilian personnel, enjoys a budget of exceeding 1.7 billion. And it has a history of misconduct, abuse, and corruption that stretches back to the late 1800s. The team of researchers also highlight how Chicago police helped assassinate the 21-year-old Black Panther chairman, Fred Hampton Sr. Were enthusiastically involved in COINTELPRO, regularly engaged in illegal and unconstitutional surveillance and enjoy a lack of effective oversight and accountability to this day. Researchers point to a 2017 Justice Department report that found repeated and frequent instances of excessive use of force, misconduct, and derogatory language and behaviors towards civilians, especially minority civilians. The same report also found the CPD took insufficient steps and often blocked efforts to stop or investigate misconduct and had a pervasive cover-up culture. This is so incredibly, it's completely not shocking at all, especially because we know that Chicago has a corruption problem when it comes to its political sector as well. So the fact that it is also bolstered by its law enforcement, it just tells you they're working hand in hand.
Yeah, by the way, during a lot of that, Rahm Emanuel was mayor of Chicago. Rahm Emanuel is corporate Democrat 101. Other establishment Democrats and Democratic leadership love Rahm Emanuel. Joe Biden went out of his way to make sure that he got a cushy job. And whether it was covering up Laquan McDonald or all the abuse of the police, the Democratic leadership was super happy to participate, and to this day rewards people like Rahm Emanuel for helping to cover it up.
Thanks for watching the Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.